Okay, so welcome to Rail Families United, building strong ties through some very hard truths. And I've decided to do what I call extras, which may or may not be tied to the rail industry specifically, but they're issues that I wanted to discuss with my audience. And they're things that, people may not necessarily tell you. Some things you need to know, others, I provide for you to think about these issues. So I've entitled this first one, They Won't Get Away with It. And the reason I felt I needed to talk about this issue is because I'm sure a lot of people are probably feeling extremely overwhelmed by the information that's being provided in my video series. And so I felt the need to address that. You know, I'm in my 60s and I've had years to put all of this together. And even throughout all of those years and that more expanded time frame than what my viewers are now having as you get bombarded with all this information that can be so overwhelming. Um, During those many years that I was doing all this analysis, there is no doubt that many a tear was shed by me, by my family, as you come to understand just how corrupt it seems this entire industry really is. And, I can't even imagine being a rail family who's lost a loved one. For example, like the family of conductor trainee Jason Clooney, but also others that have personally impacted my family. My child lost 3 coworkers in just a few years. And so, you come to know railroaders through the eyes of your children, like other employees. And so when one of them gets killed, it's hard. There's no doubt about it. And you just spend so many nights, sleepless nights. The one when my the one young person that was killed just so impacted my family. And this was not Jason Clooney. This was another person. And it was the death of that person that actually caused me to go back and look at the investigation reports for conductor trainee Jason Clooney, because I knew it would take a very long time for the accident reports to come out for this other railroader that was killed. And so even though I go through the materials for Jason, the initial death that prompted me to do all of this work was not the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney. I just remembered that, this young man had died, and I knew that by the time the second railroader had died, that his reports would likely be out. And so I started doing my investigation basically the day after this other railroader had died. And so, but again, throughout the years, it's been a very, very difficult journey. And I'm not even the immediate family member of a railroader that has been killed, like the parents of conductor trainee Jason Clooney, whom I literally dragged through years, of extremely, extremely upsetting information so that they could learn the truth about the death of their child, because no one had told them anything tied to the death of their son. And so when you're feeling overwhelmed, you need to get coping strategies, go for a walk, listen to music. You have to keep things in perspective. And for me, my faith has grown tremendously over the years, and this has made it even stronger. And you're going to see why. So I hope you enjoy this series. It may just be something for you to think about that I'm communicating with you, just to make you look at things maybe in a slightly different way. And so that's why I decided to do these extras, to provide information on various subjects that I hope will help you in learning to deal with certain issues or cope with certain issues. And some of it is just information that's not tied to the rail worker death investigation dissection, as I call it. It's just other things that are really critical that maybe you need to know. And so I hope you enjoy the series and come along for the ride. You know, folks, I can't tell you how many times that as I sat on my keyboard, it was like a lot of times looking for the needle in this haystack, not just the haystack, but in a massive hay farm. And I would always pray for protection of my family, but also for God to guide my hands, my mind, and my heart. And I cannot begin to count how many times where I would say, Lord, help me find what I need to find. And I would be at my keyboard and oh my gosh, the perfect article, the perfect piece of the puzzle would show up. Or as I read reports, coming to unravel all of these things, that God would just open my eyes to seeing what I was reading. And I just can't tell you how many times that happened. And so, this is not, you think, oh man, you look at all of this, and some people may be thinking, wow, this person's really smart figuring all this out. Honestly, folks, I think it was well beyond me. God has a plan for every life, and I think that there was a reason that I had the background I had in, very advanced technical writing, in psychology, and also in finance, and the understanding, over the years of the rail industry and all of that. And so I truly feel I was given the skills I had for a reason. God has a plan for every single life. And as the daughter of a coroner, I was raised that families have a right to the truth. No matter how ugly it is, people have a right to the truth. And the Bible does state, the truth shall set you free. If you're the parents of conductor trainee Jason Clooney, as difficult as it surely has been for them to learn all of this and to see how they were lied to by the government of Canada and, the rail carriers, everything. As difficult as it is, they were made to believe their son had flipped a switch the wrong way and, he basically died because of his mistakes, his stupidity, whatever. When the facts in the situation are clearly very, very different than what they had been led to believe. Basically, he flipped the switch the wrong way, and that's what killed him. And we're going to get to issues like the deadly training slide number 53, having to do with switching at turnouts, and how that could have played into the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney also. And so when you get all these pieces of the puzzle, the truth does set you free, because now I don't have to think maybe as a parent that my child died because of his stupidity. Maybe now I'm actually seeing that the reasons behind what really contributed to my child's death are completely different than what I was led to believe. And so, God, the Bible tells you there is nothing hidden that shall not be revealed. And I believe that with all my heart. So for those of you who don't believe in God, we're going to get into a few things here. And I decided to wear this shirt today for a reason. It says, I wear this shirt periodically. And this shirt has the periodic table on it, which is, all the chemical elements that we deal with in the world of chemistry. And my brother's a PhD in chemistry, loves the shirt. And my son, who is autistic, he memorized all these elements, If I told him, give me, 10 radioactive elements, not only can he tell me the radioactive elements, he can tell me their atomic number, you know. So he's extremely brilliant. But if I would have left him to the system, I would have lost my son, because the first thing was, well, we could put him on drugs if you like. Folks, if there's one lesson, and again, that I learned very early, it was a lesson that I learned because my son was autistic, and that was, don't trust the system. You have to do your research on your own, and you have to do a lot of praying and go from there. If I had left my son to the system when the first thing I was told when I just called for a preliminary evaluation was, well, we could put him on drugs if you like. And at the time I worked in the U.S., worked for a Global 100 company, had some of the best health insurance that you could get in the U.S. And so that was the first response when I called a neurologist's office just for a preliminary evaluation. My son had lost all his speech, and he was 2.5. And so, when that's the first response you get from the system, it really shakes your world, and you have to determine what's more important. Is it my big job with this big company, or is it my child? I chose my child, and I've never regretted it. And so, when I tell people my father as a coroner raised us to believe that every family has a right to the truth, that also means that very much every life matters. I don't care how high you are on the economic or socioeconomic totem pole. Folks, I've worked with people that are very high up in the socioeconomic totem pole, but I'll tell you, the person who picks up the trash, the woman who works, cleaning rooms, whatever, they're just as important to God as anyone else. And so, because of how I was raised, every life matters. And so that's why when I truly see injustice and people dying when they shouldn't be dying, I really felt I had to do the investigation that I did, because as I saw the rail industry becoming exponentially more dangerous because of things that had happened with my child, I knew I couldn't protect my child unless I first understood the issues that played into this rail worker work environment. And so that's kind of a little bit of the background, but there's a reason I'm wearing this shirt, which says I wear this shirt periodically, because what I'm about to discuss now has to do with chemical elements and mathematics. Okay, as my husband and I went through such challenging times with our one child who was autistic, I decided to leave the business world and focus on my child, and also decided to homeschool my children. And as you look for homeschooling materials, we came across a website, and it was a Christian website, and you could get DVDs here on basically every subject: chemistry, biology, statistics, mathematics, physics, geology, you name it, things pertaining to culture, so many subjects. And it completely opened our eyes, quite frankly, to the lies that were taught in schools, in the school system. There's just so many lies. It's unbelievable. And you know what? When I tell you, don't trust the government. Who's in charge of education? Public school systems for the most part. And so this just became such a huge eye-opener also. But anyways, what I'm going to go through in these materials that are coming up, I took from one of the DVDs that was done by a man by the name of Dr. David Menton. And he was a professor of anatomy. And, you know, he did DVDs on the seeing eye, the hearing ear, all of the different systems of the human body, and how there's just no way that there wasn't a creator behind this. But anyways, so I give you the reference here for where you could get any materials if you care to look at some of this information for yourself. But the stuff that I'm going to be discussing here, as far as the chemistry and the probabilities of certain things, are taken from what he had done on a DVD called The Evolution Controversy. And unbelievable information. And I'm sure you'll agree as we go through this. Okay, I'm going to keep this as simple as I can make it so that everybody absolutely understands what I'm talking about here. In the world of chemistry and life, there are 20 amino acids which are basically the building blocks for all proteins. So just know 20 amino acids. You don't need to know what an amino acid is. Just know it's a building block to create these other things that are called proteins in the human body. The human body has approximately 30,000 proteins, okay? The average protein has about 500 chemical bonds. So if you've ever seen like a picture of a molecule, you'll see where they take these balls and they have different colors, and one may represent carbon, another one represents oxygen, another one represents hydrogen, nitrogen, whatever, but they all have to be, you know, connected. And so the average protein has 500 of those chemical bonds. And a protein is in 3D. It's not, you know, one bond follows the next, follows the next. It's not linear. It's a 3D structure, okay? But we can even pretend that it's linear as we go through this, because what I want you just to know is that there's on average 500 chemical bonds per protein. Now, one of those 30,000 proteins in the human body is called hemoglobin. It's another word for blood. So we're going to be looking at blood in the few materials that follow here, and the probabilities of blood forming by chance, as evolution, you know, the whole theory of Darwin's evolution would try and tell you. And if there's one critical thing you need to know here, Darwin did not have a computer to calculate probabilities. So what's a probability? Let's say I have a coin. Take that coin, flip it in the air. What are the odds of it becoming heads or tail? Okay? So 1 in 100 would be, okay, it was a heads 1 out of 100 times. Okay? So 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 1,000,000. What is the probability of that happening? Very small, right? Unless you have a kind of a shady coin. But anyway, so that's what I want you to know. We're going to be looking here at a very basic probability. But again, we're looking at blood, and that's only one of about 30,000 proteins in the human body. Okay, so, you know, there's a lot of people out there that refuse to believe in God because, well, that's not scientific, whatever. Okay, I'm going to give you the other side of the argument. Let's look at it as far as probabilities, which is a matter of mathematics. So, there is a kind of an accepted level at which people who are in mathematics or statistics basically agree that if you reach this number and the probability is this small, then it's very likely not something that would happen by chance. And so, again, 1 out of 100 coin flips, not very likely, right? 100 is only 2 zeros. Now, the probability of something not happening by chance, kind of the cutoff that people seem to agree on, is 1 times 10 to the power of 50. That's a number that has 50 zeros tied to it. So 100 is 2 zeros, 1,000 is 3, keep going. 1,000,000 is 6 zeros. Then you've got billions, whatever, trillions. So each time your number, when you add 3 more zeros, your number grows by 1,000. So a number that is 1 times 10 to the power of 50 and has 50 zeros behind it is an absolutely huge number. But that's the cutoff where people say, okay, well, if it reaches this probability, the odds are it's not by chance, that something caused this to happen. Okay? Okay, so just to give you a representation of what that number looks like, 1 times 10 to the power of 50, well, that is this number down here with all these zeros. That's 50 zeros. That's a pretty big number. I mean, most of us are familiar with 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000. After that, it kind of gets to be mind-boggling. And the human brain has a really hard time understanding numbers that are this big. But I just wanted to give you the visual representation of this number, because this is the critical number where if you reach this probability, and it's one chance in this big number that this will happen, that number is so huge that, again, mathematicians and whatever, people in science kind of think there's not much chance of this happening by chance if you reach this number. Okay, so for those that would like to know what those numbers are called, if you look here, a power of that's 9, so that would be 9 zeros after the 10 would be billion. Then 12 would be a trillion. If you go all the way down here, you can see all of the names for those of you that are interested in how we describe these numbers. Now, what I find kind of funny, I took this from Britannia.com, by the way, and it was edited, last updated by this person, Eric Gregerson. But anyways, what I kind of find funny here is that as you get into bigger and bigger numbers, some of these names are left blank. I don't know if that's because we haven't assigned a name to that big of a number. I don't know. But on the second to last column here is the American name, and then you've got the British name in the last column. So for those of you that are interested in that, there it is. Okay, so back to the probability of hemoglobin or blood forming by chance. And again, you would have needed a computer to calculate this stuff, and Darwin did not have a computer when he came up with his theory of evolution. So the probability of blood forming by chance, note the number here is not 1 times 10 to the power of 619. There's 619 zeros here after the number 10 at the beginning. So if the cutoff for saying, well, it's likely not going to happen by chance is 1 times 10 to the power of 50, then the chance of just blood, one of about 30,000 proteins in the human body forming by chance, and we're not even getting into the wonders of the blood as far as all of the tasks of the blood, what it does. We're not getting into here the proper folding of the molecule. So let's just get all of the bonds in order. The protein then has to fold perfectly upon itself in order to be usable. If it doesn't fold perfectly upon itself, the body can't use it. And so the number again is not 1 times 10 to the power of 619. Take that number and multiply it by 4. That is the probability of blood forming by chance. It'll never happen, folks. And that is one of about 30,000 proteins. So do I think there's a creator? Absolutely. And so when I say they're not getting away with it, as far as all the corruptions, you may think, man, they've been getting away with this for years, lying to rail families about what's really killing rail workers. They're not going to get away with it. Personally, if I had to have my judgment, I think I'd rather face man's judgment than face God's, because we are told that Jesus Christ will rule with an iron rod, and there will be no excuses and no lies when we all stand before Jesus Christ at the day of judgment. So, do I think they're getting away with it? I would hope they're not going to get away with it on earth, because, again, I think that judgment would be far more lenient than what may be imposed upon standing before Christ and having to explain why you did what you did in life. For the almighty buck? For pride? For the power of having a powerful position? Being a chairman of the board or a CEO? Will it be worth it? I don't think so. And if there's one thing I always tell people, it is that eternity is a long time to be in the wrong place. Okay, so as you look at this massive number, and again, that is the probability of only one of over 30,000 proteins in the human body forming by chance. So folks, there is zero chance, and I mean zero chance, of the human body being formed by chance. Zero. So yes, folks, there absolutely is a God, and his son is Jesus Christ, as we're told in the Bible. And so yes, there is a God. He sees and he counts every tear. Just as he knows the numbers of hairs on your head, as again the Bible tells us, he can tell you exactly how many hairs is on the head of every single person. And if he knows when a sparrow falls, he absolutely knows when one of his children fall, because God has such a special relationship that he wants to have with human beings. And so, if one falls or is killed, which is even worse, killed by an evildoer. And folks, you have to be evil to, it's one thing for accidents to happen, but when you know there's a problem and you decide not to address these problems because, it may not reflect well on me or my organization, or it might cost a lot of money, and so you prioritize your pride, your position, your money over the life of another person, that's evil. There's no other way for me to state that. In my opinion, those who do that are evildoers. And so there absolutely will be accountability one day. And you can be 100% sure of that. And I hope that at least people do find hope in knowing that there absolutely will be accountability one day. Yes, in my opinion, I would rather see the accountability happen on earth and that these people repent. And, even if you do repent, there are consequences to your actions. And maybe if you need to go to prison, you need to go to prison. Maybe, God's plan is for you to find God in prison. That happens a lot. And if that's your one chance to be in the right place when you do die, then by all means, send them to prison. That's my attitude. But there will be accountability one day, one way or another. Okay, for this last part of this video, everything comes down to a matter of trust. Who do you trust in life? Do you trust the government? Do you trust the rail carriers to do what's right? I trust God to do what's right. And that's what keeps me sane as I go through all of these issues, because they can be absolutely overwhelming. And so I really love this sweatshirt. My lifeguard walks on water. And when I'm feeling down, this is what I wear to remind myself of who is truly in control of my life and every other life. Yes, Jason, Clooney, and others have died when they probably should never have died. But it's like I tell Jason's parents, Jason will not have died in vain. If it was up to man's world, he would have been forgotten as soon as he died. But now, even beyond death, his life has a purpose because it may help save other lives in the rail industry, in, the public at large. And so God has a plan for every life. And as hard as that plan can be, it's not up to us to question the plan. It's, in my opinion, life on earth is a test to see where you're going to end up. And even more important than all of these issues, you have to ask yourself, what is God's plan for my life? How can I make a difference? And am I 100% sure that I'm going to be in heaven when I die? Do I believe in Jesus Christ? Does my family, do my children believe in Jesus Christ? These are much, much bigger issues than anything we are discussing here. And so that's why I felt the need to discuss this and what, keeps me grounded and gives me perspective as I go through all of this. As overwhelming as I'm sure a lot of you are finding these materials, when it comes to, rail worker death investigations and whatever, you have to keep everything in perspective, and you do have to remind yourself every day, God is in control. Okay, so this concludes this video. Again, like, share, subscribe. I hope you did like it, because it's an important issue. And so, and if you're subscribed, make sure you remain subscribed. I will see you on the next one. Have a great day.